Hi, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And this is ReDIScover, a conversation where we travel through everything that makes up the essence of who we are and how to live authentically and imaginatively.
Here, we invite you to join us as we explore and discuss a little bit of, well, everything.
From Disney to cultivating your most authentic life to deepening your relationships and talking about the real stuff.
We hope you'll find this a space that speaks to you, encourages you, and brings a little bit of magic into your day.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And welcome back to this week's episode of ReDIScover. We are continuing on with Travel Month. We have gone all over the country, and today we are going all over the world. And we have a very special guest for today's conversation, and it is going to be a blast. So we are so happy, especially me, to welcome Steven, my boyfriend, on the podcast today to talk about all things living abroad, because that is just his passion and what he could talk about all day long. So this was just a no-brainer. So welcome to ReDIScover, Steven.
Hi, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Now you guys have to take it easy on him. This is Steven's very first podcast interview ever.
It's a bit intimidating.
So obviously,
I don't know. You guys are seasoned pros at this point, so
yeah, but you're a frequent listener.
It's
so
true. It's true.
You kind of know the flow.
It really is just like we literally are sitting on the floor talking. Like it's the easiest thing in the world.
I'm petting a dog and drinking a beer.
Yeah. There you go. And usually we say grab your coffee and listen with us, but since Steven's here, grab your beer and listen with us today.
Yes.
That's the vibe when Steven's around. So our topic today is going to be all about living abroad and some traveling abroad too. But Steven actually lived abroad in Nanjing, China for 2 years, and we just want to pick his brain about all things living abroad because there's so much that goes into it, and people talk about doing it all the time, but to talk to somebody who actually has done it, I think is a whole different outlook. Steven has some really great insight, and we're really excited. We came up with some great questions for him to get a full circle view of this experience.
And some horror stories. You guys are really interested.
I was gonna say, yeah. I think it's important to get real about those things too, like the not so glamorous moments, especially now. I think there's so much like on TikTok and everything of these like glamorous, like living abroad and traveling through Europe or Asia or whatever. And like, yes, those things happen, but I think it's also important to talk about like the day-to-day stuff. And we were talking before, like I'm somebody who always has romanticized this idea of living abroad in a particular country. But there's so much about it that also kind of causes me some anxiety. So I'm excited, Steven, to hear all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yep. So I'm here to share.
Yay.
How much time do you guys have?
Well, as much as you need.
Our episodes tend to be quite long. So thank you guys for listening, by the way.
Good luck, whoever's editing this.
Oh, me.
This might be a joint effort.
Oh, boy. Well, we're so excited. Let's get started. I think to begin, we would love for our listeners to just get to know you better. So can you give us a little background on your journey, your life journey, and what initially inspired you to live abroad as well?
Of course. So I'm Steven, and I'm originally from Orlando, Florida, but grew up more on the Tampa Bay side of Florida near the Gulf Coast. And from that time, life was pretty simple. I grew up with my mom and my grandparents mostly, and during that time when I was growing up, we would travel a lot. We would take cruises. We would, do some family trips. We would go to Disney a lot, of course. But, it was during a time where, my grandparents were retiring, or they've just been retired, and they were, had the travel bug, and they've been saving their entire life, and they wanted to take me and my mom and the rest of my family along with them. And that kind of, initially sparked it for me for travel. And also my parents initially actually met in Grand Cayman Islands. It was during a time where my dad actually didn't even know where he was going when he accepted the offer to work in hospitality down there. He agreed to the offer and then looked at a map to see where the heck he was going, And so it's always just been kind of in my blood. And my uncle lived in Japan, in Hong Kong, and did a bunch of things. My aunt has also been well-traveled and well-cultured. So there's always been a travel bug in my family, and it wasn't really till I graduated from UCF in Orlando and kind of wrapped up some Disney experience that I had. Yep, go Knights. And
Right on.
yeah, absolutely. And flew out to California, did the college program out there for a little bit. And I think it was at that point where I kind of left my roots in Florida. I was willing to try something new, and I was kind of at a transition in my career where I was thinking about leaving hospitality and trying something completely different. And that's when I found a job offer with Disney English. And that was through, of course, the Disney company, and it had gotten me to Nanjing, China. And it was completely just something that I was not very serious about in the beginning, but when the ball started rolling, it became, a reality. And that really just kind of kicked everything off in my life, so it's crazy. Everything has landed exactly where it's been at this point, but yeah, it's been a great ride so far.
Wow. What a great story so far.
I really do think things like that kind of are in your blood or in your bones, or just, I mean, the environment that you're raised in. Clearly everyone in your family was just so able to give themselves over to whatever the experience was going to bring, or like saying yes to the job and then being like, so where am I moving to? Usually people do it the other way
Right.
around, but that's so cool. I mean, having obviously known Jess forever and ever and ever, it's just so funny how like the same she is in that way.
Yes.
She's just like, yeah, we'll figure it out. Everything will be fine. We'll
Exactly.
just go.
Literally say yes and think about everything else later, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, speaking of Jess, and for anyone out there who doesn't know the story, I would love for you guys to tell everyone the story of how you two met.
Well, that's very good. I usually point at Jess because she tells it so perfectly, but since I'm the guest of the podcast,
I would love to hear you tell it, actually.
Yeah, well, so if I remember correctly, it was during the summer. I forget what year. Was it 2019?
2019.
Yep. And I was in the heart of my second contract in Nanjing. And, it was, I guess, during
China, by the way, which
Yes,
I was
China.
not living in, by the way.
No, very,
Jess was
very
living
set in
next
Florida
door
at the
to
time.
me.
Yes.
But, saw each other on Instagram, and we were just shooting each other messages here and there. And then, it was during a time where, you were not feeling well. So you had some time to your phone. And it was during a time where I was very overworked and working summer camp, summer school, and I was exhausted. And, and we were just kind of, glued to our phones. And we just started chatting, and it really kicked off. And then I convinced you to download WeChat, and we went, did video chat calls, and they started from like 30 minutes to like at one point it was like 4 hours long,
Yeah.
and it really kicked off. And then it wasn't till October I was thinking about going to New York City to surprise my mom for Christmas. And since I knew you were in Buffalo, or your family was in Buffalo, figured that we could meet up. And so I would surprise my mom for Christmas, and then also surprise her that, hey, like, I'm also meeting this girl that I've been talking to for 7 months. And, is it okay if she stays and hangs out and meets the whole family? And, and it really just kind of kicked off into full gear from there. And, we really didn't know what it was going to lead to, especially when I went back to China in December.
Because COVID didn't exist yet.
Right.
At that point. It was right before.
Right. But we had some plans. You were coming up for Chinese New Year, which was in January. And then we also had a plan to go to Japan for a few weeks in April. So every couple of months, that was kind of our plan until we kind of figured it out. But of course, with COVID, instead of her coming over to Asia, I came back to the States and been, here since. So,
Yep.
And it's been wonderful. If I was a betting man, I would not have seen this coming, of course, with COVID. But, living in Buffalo, New York has been an amazing experience, and being shown around, in the States again, but also get closer to Jess.
Yeah.
My girlfriend, who I love.
I love you too. You're so cute.
I'm gonna cry.
I know.
It's funny hearing that story now, though, because I remember when like all of that was like happening, and like hearing it on. I mean, I remember Jess and I went shopping or something before Christmas in 2019, and you were like, "Oh, I should get this coat for New York because it'll be cold and we'll be walking around." And you were like nervous to meet his family, and we were talking about that. And I just remember thinking, like, this is so cool that you're just like, okay, we'll just see what happens. I'm just going to go and meet these people and see what goes on. And now I'm going to go to China. And I've always admired that adventurous spirit so much in
Thank
you,
you.
Jess. So I'm glad that you have a partner who not only shares it, but I think you bring down each other. So
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, nothing to lose but everything to gain at the moments like
Exactly.
that. So
Yeah.
if
And I feel like I was just totally surrendering to the whole experience.
yeah, you were
And
going into the wolves. I mean, me and my family could have been absolutely crazy,
yeah,
and we kind of are sometimes, but like, at the right level
in
of
a
crazy.
good way.
But
Yeah.
you know,
everyone's family is a little crazy
It
sometimes.
is true. If you don't have a crazy family, are you
You're no
human?
fun.
Yeah. No, but it was great. And like, who knew where that was gonna land? And I remember seeing you on Instagram too, and just, I don't know, like something inside of me was like, I feel like I know him already, but I don't, or I feel like we're gonna talk or date or something. And it didn't, like, we didn't start talking for about 5 months. But I think at the time you were living in China and you had all of these travel photos, and it was funny. I felt like something when I was looking at your pictures like resonated with me. And then
well, not only did you like Mamma Mia, but you also just came off a trip with Japan and China as well. So I
yeah,
think that really kicked off. It's like, oh well,
I've been to Asia, you're in
right,
Asia. Yeah.
exactly.
Oh yeah, the first thing we ever talked about was Mamma Mia. So that, is another point.
Amazing.
Amazing. So yeah, so that's kind of the backstory, and it's been amazing. And I'm so excited to see where life leads, because it just feels like we're living in like an unfolding story all the time, because we both have such traveler spirits. Like, you never know what's going to happen. We've been anticipating an eventual, adventure since we met, essentially. So
Right.
I'm
it's
just
only a
over
matter
here
of
like
time.
waiting for it. Like every time Jess texts me, I'm like, oh, she's gonna tell me she's moving to the other side of the world. One of these days.
And then friends can come visit,
I was
Yep.
her
gonna
friends,
say,
my friends, and get
yeah,
everyone together. So
Yeah, come visit us,
ReDIScover
guys.
on location.
Yes. But all right. Well, that was a really fun trip down memory lane. And I think we should just kick some things off and first off talk about China, because we want to hear about your personal experience of living abroad in that country specifically. So maybe you can give us a little overview on what Disney English is, what an expat is, and what it was like to live there specifically. And just a disclaimer for everyone listening, Disney English has sadly and unfortunately closed its doors since the COVID-19 pandemic began, but Stephen was there until the very end, so I'm just going to let you go into this.
So in China, there is a huge market for after-school learning centers, and most of them that specialize in English. So these would be things that students from ages 2 to 12 would do after their day at school or on the weekends, and they would come to these centers to play games in like a English immersion, interactive, fun environment with teachers or English trainers who are ESL certified and trained. They get their TEFL, and they're all from around the world, and they teach the students for about maybe like an hour to 2 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was great about the opportunity was that, you didn't need a teaching degree, you didn't need a teaching certification or a license in the United States or any other country. You just took an online course, 120-hour TEFL course, and you have a bachelor's degree, and then you would be certified to live and work in China and a lot of other countries as well, because, teaching ESL around the world, like in Thailand and Japan and a whole bunch of other places, really big. But in China is absolutely just gigantic. So Disney found that market and they really capitalized on it, or at least they tried to. And yeah, and they opened up centers all throughout China. So they start off in Beijing and Shanghai. That was about 10 years ago. And then they grew to cities like Nanjing, where I lived, and then also Chengdu, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. So it was a great opportunity for people who worked for Disney or who was a teacher or just wanted to get out of the States and try something new. And that kind of built an expat community in some of these areas. So Nanjing is, of course, not the biggest city in the world. And the same story that I said about my dad, I accepted a Disney English offer, not knowing where the heck Nanjing, China was, because everyone, of course, wants to go to Shanghai, of course, with Disneyland and, the buns and in Beijing, the Great Wall and things like that. But Nanjing, I think, was really special. It had some grit to it. And it was real, I feel like, real to what a Chinese city would be. It's less commercial, less touristy. And I think, and we can definitely go into this a little bit later, but what I felt like more was group of expats and people who lived and worked there. Mostly people who live there who are foreigners were either students studying at the Nanjing University, which is huge for business, a lot of people working in medicine and international business, and a lot of them were also teachers. So when you go to a bar and you see a lot of people from across the world, they're usually kind of fit into one of those professions or occupations. And it really, I think it kind of built everyone a little bit closer because, levels like Shanghai, where you have 20, 30 million people living there, and then you have Nanjing that has 7, and it's a little bit built closer. You kind of get more of more of a community of expats that you can live with. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. And an expat is a foreigner, correct? Do you have a definition?
An individual temporarily or permanently residing in a country other than that of their citizenship.
So basically a foreigner.
Right.
Yeah. And then going back to Nanjing, like the way that I always described it to people to tell them where you lived is it kind of seems comparable to like an Orlando to Tampa type of distance. So from Shanghai to Nanjing.
Right.
As far as like to travel between the two.
Yeah. So if that kind of gives you more of a concept of the distance.
Yeah. And especially that's mostly by speed train.
You mean you don't sit on I-4? Weird.
Yeah, no I-4 in China.
No I-4, no.
So what do you think were the best parts about China and the worst parts about it?
Of course, the best parts of living in China, I guess it's what you're hoping to take away from the experience. So if you're looking to live internationally and have it be affordable and have a community already out there where you can reach out, you can socialize, you can be an extrovert or an introvert, you can be really whoever you want to be. People have lived and worked in China who are expats or foreigners, so you're not the first one and you certainly won't be the last one. So you're basically joining a group that has already existed, and that kind of gives you a sense of security that everything's going to be okay once you get there. But of course, with China and living in Nanjing, I think because there's not a lot of tourism in Nanjing, one thing that I always appreciate is that when people would see you, and of course you're in China with 7 million people. So if you are not Chinese and you're 6'5" like I am, you kind of stand out in a crowd. And I think people would want to get to know you a little bit more because they don't really see you as a tourist. They see you as someone who lives and works in China. So they see you as a teacher, they see you as a student, they see you as a doctor, they see you as something, successful and contributing to the economy and to the city in some way. I always felt like people were really nice and friendly and courteous, to foreigners out there. Of course, you hear horror stories and things like that, which happens with people from different parts of the world. But I think in an overall general sense, it's always kind of nice to be seen as a foreigner or an expat or as a teacher instead of like a tourist who's just there to take pictures with Mickey Mouse or take selfies in front of the Bund and then
not that that's a bad
go
thing.
to McDonald's and leave, which is not a bad thing. But I think there's just, you live here, you're learning the culture, you're learning the language, you're contributing to society, you're, helping the next generation of English speaking students or Chinese students learn English. And I think that was really rewarding. And overall, of course, the transportation was fantastic. Speed trains, DDs, which is the Chinese Uber. Well, if you're trying to get across town, it's like $5 to really get anywhere. And it's super efficient, very crowded sometimes, but always very nice.
Yeah.
And also street food. If you've been partying all night on a Saturday night and, you've been hitting the soju a little bit and you've been dancing all night, nothing better than $2 noodles or fried rice or meat on a stick right in front of your apartment. Those are just the little hidden things that you don't think about when you go over there, or at least I never knew about them. But that was always a fun and enjoyment part of China. But I would say some of the difficulties and challenges living in China, I think I was able to look past a lot of them. You kind of just roll your eyes and say, okay, well, that's China for you. But for especially the ladies, I would say, the restrooms were not always as convenient in some locations, not maybe always the cleanest. A lot of smoking. If you guys are very sensitive to cigarette smoke, I advise, especially indoors, I advise you just be aware of that. But yeah, I think if, my mom or like my buddies, Mason and Alex, are listening to this, they all came to visit me in Nanjing while I was there and would love to hear, what they had to say. But also, I don't know, what was something that you were also out there as well?
Let's see. I think, yeah, the bathrooms are a big one because they do have the squatty potties versus like actual
Western
toilets.
toilets.
And I think I got into a situation where I didn't have any toilet paper at one point, which was scary.
Yeah, you got to carry
You
tissues
need
around.
to bring your own.
Yep.
And I think you hear people spitting a lot. That
Yep.
was like one thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's very normalized there though.
Yeah. Visually, China is very clean,
Mm-hmm.
but you kind of looking at maybe some sanitation here and there in some public areas, it's not very much the same. So, you could be in a restaurant and I've seen people kind of just like spit on the ground once or twice and kind of do the sinus cleaning, not to freak anybody out who's listening, but it's
no, but it's like it's
real.
those weird things that like nobody talks about. So
Yep.
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. And then, there's always, I remember picking people up from the airport when we have new recruits, and I always gave them Steven's rule of thumb or laws to abide by. And that was one of them. Also, watch out for scooters because you will get hit. I got hit by a few of them walking to work.
God.
Because they'll just zing around. They all drive on the sidewalk, even though they have a lane on the street, and they'll come by you, going right by you. And you better be listening or paying attention to the beeping noises. So watch out for scooters. And drinking water, you definitely can't drink the tap water. You got to drink by the gallon. Yep. So, it's just those little things. But again, once you live there and you get used to it after a few months, you eventually just kind of get accustomed to just how to live there. And for me, the pros outweighed the cons.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who did the program at Disney English, who went to China for the first time and maybe even left the country for the first time in their lives, you'll hear a mixed bag of experiences, but it just depends on what you're looking for. And I think if you're able to just understand that this is a different country and you're at someone else's home and you're there, there's 7 million people that lives in the city and there's 1.something billion people who live in this country, and not saying that everyone acts the same, but in a general culture, some things you see consistently across the board. And since it's consistent, you just kind of get used to it over time.
Right. Yeah.
And so, it was great.
Oh,
I still miss it. I'll still visit.
Steven loves China.
Yeah.
I feel I've learned so much about the experience just from talking to you. And it's nice because you are so passionate about it. So thanks for sharing a little bird's eye view into what it's like.
So whether it's China or anywhere else in the world really, or even people who aren't Americans thinking about moving to the States, so many people talk about living abroad, especially now that we're kind of getting into a moment in time where freelancing is such a prevalent thing and working remotely is such a prevalent thing. But a lot of people don't really know where to begin with that. What would your actionable advice be for someone who was actually very serious about starting the process? And how do you even begin to approach all of the logistics, like getting a visa, what health insurance looks like how to get medication if you're sick, your travel documents, and all those kind of like the nitty gritty stuff?
That's a really good question.
Also really involved one, so I apologize.
No, I think that's a really good question that I think people don't initially know how to take that first step, because I think that is the step that really makes something into like a blue sky phase kind of thing into something more tangible and realistic. Yep. I think the main thing, so with freelance and remote working, of course, the environment is completely different, because if you were a digital nomad 2 years ago before COVID, you had to be specialized in a certain field, or you had to really be a freelance or independent writer or doing something or other that really, separated you from the 9-to-5 office and really give you the freedom to go to Bali, go to Thailand, and those are just the places off the top of my head. But now with COVID, people can really travel with, I think, most jobs now, if they can really, get their company or their managers to agree to it. But I think the hardest thing with that is, of course, deciding where to go, like you said. For me personally, I think the logistics is the place affordable? What's the cost of living? And how long you want to be there? And if you're looking for programs where you are there for a month and you're kind of hopping around, they obviously exist and they're out there. But if you really want to take your remote job and live in Bali for a year and be a digital nomad and working in cafes and go into, Ubud to do the swing and after work and do the whole thing, you have to look into the visa option. You have to look into the nitty gritty government policies and stuff like that, which I think independently is very hard to go about. So when moving forward, and even with Disney, moving forward, I always found that it's easier to pair with a company that's international, that's hiring foreigners, so they can handle all that stuff for you. So to kind of go into the second part of your question, which is about like work visas, healthcare, and all that stuff, teaching overseas is great in this aspect because they want native English speakers and they are willing to pay top dollar and assist you with your transition over to that country if you would teach English at their schools. So a lot of them will handle your visa registration and your healthcare and your transportation, your first 2 weeks of staying in the country while you look for an apartment and things like that, which is so beneficial and makes it so much easier. And that's what happened with Disney English in China, was that, they make those accommodations for you. Me and my onboarding pal, Brian, we stayed at a hotel that was close to work and it was on Disney's dollar. And we stayed there for 2 weeks while you look for an apartment, because once you get your visa to enter the country, you have to get your working permit or your residence permit. And you have to have an apartment in order to get that residence permit. So, and you need to get an apartment. So you always need some time to look around the city, but you're definitely on the clock in order to do that. And then during that time, you can't immediately work because you need that residence permit and there's a whole bunch of hoops to jump through. And that was with China versus other countries might be a little bit easier. But I always found that it's easier to try to partner with another company, or in this case, a learning institution, a school, so they can kind of handle that for you. And I think that makes it much easier to decide where to go. But then once you get to that part of the world, and let's just say if you're working for that company after 6 months or a contract and you want to do something else, then you network, and find something else. And you can extend your work visa or your residence permit, and you can really create a life. And like most people who I met that lived out in Nanjing or in China for 10, 15, 20 years and even had families out there, they very much started off how I did and a lot of other people did. They became an ESL teacher, did that for a year, and then, did something completely different, or they stayed in that field and they decided just to stay. And then 15 years went by, And so I think if you're trying to get the ball rolling, I think getting some help in those areas and try to lock in a job in a position. But then again, people who, again, like our digital nomads, they just pack up a suitcase, bring their laptop, and they just go. And, they'll just stay a month and extend whatever work visa they need to go to. Maybe they're in a country that doesn't have strict laws of living there or being citizens or anything like that. So I think that's a really interesting question. Something that I think Jess and I have been kind of learning about and looking at actually in the last year.
Yeah.
And especially with COVID, things are changing, with borders opening, closing, going on lockdown. And Nanjing is actually in lockdown right now.
Are they really?
And, things going on in Australia too and stuff like that. So, it's ever changing.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say the internet is probably your best friend in this case, just to kind of familiarize yourself and do some research. And the baseline is definitely going on and giving it a good thorough Google to start learning.
Or go on LinkedIn and try to find a recruiter.
I was going to say, that's especially now, that's huge.
Yep. Speak to a recruiter and ask them what's the current situation in the country that you're, hiring for.
It's a very good, that's a good tip.
Yeah.
And even like larger corporations that have really, really streamlined processes because they do this like on a global scale all the time.
Great.
Well, cool.
Awesome.
No, that was awesome.
That was really good. Thank you.
I'm just sitting here like, I wonder what Italy's policy is on visa.
Give it a Google.
I'm going to look it up.
Hey,
So our next question. So like we mentioned a little bit before, when you worked in China, you were very involved with your onboarding team and welcoming new people. So you got to meet a lot of brand new expats who were at the very, very beginning of their journey. So putting yourself back in those shoes and relating to that experience, what would be your best advice that you would give them as someone who's experiencing culture shock to make their adjustment easier to their new surroundings?
I would say take your time, and everything is not going to be done at the timeline that you think it's going to be done. So, you're not going to have the bull by its horns when you get there. It's not going to be like that in the first 3 months you're there or in the first 6 months. The onboards and the people that were coming into at least Nanjing, and people who would just ask, what's it like with Disney English? Former cast members from Walt Disney World and Disneyland were reaching out to me and just curious about the program. And a lot of them either have never worked for Disney before, have never been to China before, or they've never taught before. And, those were kind of like the three main areas. One person would maybe have one of those three things, but then they had no idea anything about working for Disney or teaching, but they've been to China or whatever way you want to shape it. But people come to a new country, or at least to Nanjing, and this was my interpretation as well, that I thought everything was going to kind of fall exactly into place. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get my apartment. I got my suitcase, everything is going to be going perfectly. My visa is going to be perfect and everything like that. It's like, no, absolutely not. Because things change in a wind over there. And especially with policies and government, things like that. So if you're anxious to work and get ready to go, it could be like a month. It could be like 3 months. And people are just kind of like, oh, shoot. But I think it just shows the kind of environment that you're going to be in, especially when you're on holiday and you're traveling somewhere. We've had people, out in Bali, Thailand, who lost their ATM card and they were completely broke for the rest of the trip. We've had people go on excursions in the Philippines that got completely lost. We actually had a team member who accidentally hiked into an active military base in China, and had to get one of our managers who spoke fluent, Mandarin, to help him get out of the situation. So even though you're leaving home and you feel like, you can be anybody you want, and, it's kind of like no strings, it's very not like that situation. Things are going to happen to you that are completely out of your control, or completely in your control, and you didn't even know about it. But when you have a good support system, what doesn't kill you make you stronger, right? So I think it helps you kind of learn overall and kind of give you the backbone that you need to, if you want to continue living this life overseas, it kind of makes you prepared for anything. And I think that's, if someone told me that in the beginning, I'd be like, okay, so I'm going to be homeless in a week because I can't find my apartment and I have to leave the hotel in 2 days, but I'll be okay because, this is what happens. And things like that happen. So yeah.
Kind of having an approach of, all right, things aren't going to be what I expect, but I know I'll figure it out.
Right.
And being able to literally surrender to it.
Right.
So
it's like that dog in that building where he's just drinking coffee and it's like, I'm fine, where there's like flames.
That's me. I say that all the time.
Like, he is the most relatable meme to our generation, I think.
And we're just, everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
Yeah. It's almost like just letting that be the only expectation. Like, you don't go into it with any expectations other than I'll figure it out. Like, let the expectation be whatever happens, I'm going to figure it out.
Right.
And it's hard to have an expectation of a foreign country too, when you've never been there, and trying to relate it to things at home just isn't necessarily going to give you an accurate representation in your mind of like how to handle it, because you're basically learning a whole new lifestyle, and going with the flow of it is going to be the best way to learn.
So I know you mentioned some of the challenging and difficult parts about living in China specifically, but what are some of the most challenging parts about living abroad kind of in general that you feel like you don't hear a lot of people talk about? And then how did you find yourself overcoming them?
I would actually say with confidence that a language barrier is actually not that hard to get around.
Yeah. So what are your tips for that?
Right.
To ease people's minds?
Well, I think having an understanding that English is spoken and is around more places than people really expect. And I think, at least in China, in some of the cities, bigger cities, not like Shanghai or Beijing, but in some other cities, they have English posted on the metros. They have English in some menus, especially, of course, Western restaurants. But a lot of my parents, the students that I taught, they spoke English as well, pretty fluently. A lot of them do business overseas or with international partners. So parent-teacher conferences were very simple.
Yeah.
sometimes didn't need any translation. So yeah, I think in that aspect, we use trip.com a lot for train tickets and plane tickets.
Mm.
So instead of going up to the vendor at the Nanjing railway station, you could just buy a ticket on Trip, just show them the barcode, scan it, don't have to say a single word to each other. DD, that's the Chinese Uber. You don't need to bombard your driver on which exit to take or where to drive. They know where they're going. So you don't need to tell them or communicate to them at all. They just take you exactly where you need to go. And that's pretty much how simple that was. Overall, though, I mean, you can take public transportation and not have to worry about it. If you're going to a restaurant, everything's in Mandarin. You take a picture of it. Some translating apps can just translate what's on the picture, and then you can pick, and then you just say, Jigga, this one, and just be like, okay. And they'll see that you're a foreigner, so it'll be a lot of pointing and nodding and saying like, doi, doi, and then just like moving on. But yeah, so I think language barrier is fine. I think some of the biggest challenges, I think, living overseas, or I'm sorry, living in China, I think sometimes it's the air quality. I think that really kicks in, and the food. So people don't really feel well in the first 3 months that they get there. I think it's mostly because of the oils, and maybe the quality of food really upsets their stomach. And then also sometimes, especially during the cooler seasons, the air gets really thick and you have to wear a mask. And sometimes in Beijing, you can't even see across the street. Sometimes it's so bad. So once that kind of happens, and especially working with kids, and if they cough on you or sneeze on you and you get sick, but I think people kind of panicked a little bit once they got really sick overseas. And luckily insurance in China, everything was covered. But if you come in with a cold, they're going to take your blood and give you an x-ray anyways for a head cold. So actually that's a pro instead of a con. But I think people get a little bit freaked out when they get sick overseas. They didn't really expect how they were going to adapt in a climate or in a area like that. And so yeah, I think that's kind of something that wasn't really expected.
That's a
Living over
good
there.
point.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing a lot of people I mean, okay, I'm speaking from like my own. What do I do if something like I have a flare up of something or something happens and I'm in a country where I don't know like what their medication is like or how much access I'll have to it. I think that's a thing that causes anxiety for a lot of people,
Yeah.
especially if they have something more like chronic going on.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, if that happens, and we had a few instances where, some teachers had to go back home for more serious conditions. But again, if you're just, sick, you have a head cold or something, that's really bothering you, then, they'll take care of you. And, like Jess, you weren't feeling well when you first came to China, and, went to a pharmacy, and, we gave you, 3 boxes of medicine to take in 2 days and some tea. And, you've probably felt a little bit better in 3 days, right?
Chinese medicine is magical, I have to say. It really clears things up.
It's definitely different.
It's the tea, yeah.
That's the thousands of years of herbal teas and
I know.
Right.
They know what they're doing.
They
But
do.
that was a good perspective. I think that's really important to speak to. Okay, so next, what were your ride or die best tips for living / traveling abroad? Like your life hacks that made your day-to-day what it was.
I say, you build your network of people you hang out with, and then just say yes to whatever they're doing. No matter what.
Cool.
If you're completely broke and you don't get paid in 2 weeks or whatever, but you have a couple of friends going to Taiwan that weekend, they go to Taipei for 2 days, like just say yes and just go. Because you're out there for a reason, and there's a difference between living and traveling around. I think once you're living there, you kind of get comfortable where you're at, and you kind of forget what really motivates you and why you're also there. And if traveling's in your blood, then sometimes just like, okay, well, just try to say yes to every opportunity that comes to you. Because now looking at it, I said no to a few things, but I said yes to most things. And now looking at it, I'm so glad that it happened, because
you did some amazing things while you were out there.
Absolutely. And then I think that's the best way. And when you're traveling with a group of people, you build closer bonds with them. But also if you're traveling solo, I think is just as rewarding, because I think when you're staying at hostels instead of hotels, you're bunking with other people who are in the same boat. They're traveling solo and they're doing this for the first time, or they're more seasoned, and everyone's just super outgoing. And just, you want to know if you're going out to Xi'an, China to go see the Terracotta Warriors, and go stay at a hostel and go meet some people, and they'd be like, hey, what are you guys doing tomorrow? And they're like, oh, we're doing this, that, and the other thing. Be like, okay, well, let me join. They'll be like, absolutely, and I think it really makes you step out of your comfort zone. And I think being in an environment where you get out of your apartment and do that and stay away from things that made you comfortable back at home, because you kind of notice that after a while, after the first year or two, people kind of result back to their Western food habits. People might order more KFC, than maybe, Chinese food, or they might want to stay home on weekends instead of going out with their friends and traveling to neighboring cities. And that was always kind of my main focus. And if there were any signs that I could put up in my apartment to say, Stephen, get out of your apartment this weekend and go have some fun, or get out of Nanjing this weekend. You've been here for 3 months. Let's travel. Let's do a weekend trip somewhere in Soju or in Hangzhou or something and have fun. And I think that was kind of a good sign that, you're still doing what you enjoy, and give you the motivation to kind of continue on and living your life to the fullest. Yeah.
And also just like the ease of access that if
Yeah.
you're living in Asia, it's a lot easier to see Asia. And if you're
Right.
living in the EU, you can visit all the countries in the EU.
Just hop in a train, right?
Much more easily, yes, than if you're living on the other side of the ocean. So
yeah, take advantage of your close proximity while you're there. Like, I know for me, I'd be like, don't waste any time. You need to go see everything. But
she'd be like, let's go. We have things to do.
We have things to do, countries to see.
If you've ever traveled with Jess.
I've never.
No, you never.
Where have we gone?
So oftentimes, a lot of people have a fear of being in a new country and feeling alone. So what do you think the best way is to make friends while you're living abroad?
What people sometimes do is they rely on their work friends a lot on their social outings. And then you realize that it's the same 12 people that you're hanging out with every single day. And not saying anything bad about those same 12 people. If they're listening to this, I love you all. But, and I miss you. Let's go back. But I think it's good and it's healthy to find another social group to get around. And whether that be at a bar and you guys are going out for drinks, or if you're taking a Mandarin class and you're hanging out with your fellow students, or if you have a couple of friends that want to come visit you for a couple of weeks and stay, live on your couch. That's always, good, because I think when you see the area you're in through their eyes again, especially if you've been there for a while, it makes you more sociable and step out of your comfort zone for the sake of them having a good time too. So I think being involved in more things, which I think is also transferable to being in the States, but if you're doing more activities and even just for one day and you meet and you have like an interaction with somebody, I think it really can spark, because again, most of these people are out here by themselves too. And they're looking for someone just to go out to a cafe with and hang out. And maybe they want to hang out with your social group, or you want to hang out with theirs. So, and I think that kind of gets you out of a rut that I think most people do face eventually, especially, when turnover and people want to move on and try new things. And the same group of people that you were with in the beginning of the time you were there, they're gone. So like, what do you do after that? Right. And you kind of, staring at the ceiling and you're just like, I have no friends. It's like, no, just go make some new ones, because there's always new people coming and there's always something to do. There's always something to do. So
I think this is a really good question. So people can often convince themselves that living abroad is too hard or not doable for whatever reason. So what are some common roadblocks that you notice from people who talk about living abroad with like that hesitancy, and how would you reframe that mindset around those perceived obstacles?
That's a good question. I think people think that other countries are like in a whole different world, which very much they are culturally, but it's not. Your cars still run on 4 wheels. People still eat 3 times a day. People still sleep at night. Mostly speaking, on Saturday nights, you still see crazy people.
Americans are questionable about that anyway.
So I think knowing that other places you travel to are just not that different, And, you know, if you need clothes, there are shops to buy those clothes. If you need, you know, medicine, or if you need makeup or prescription or whatever, you can still go to a store. There's a Sephora down the street. There's an H&M that sells jackets on clearance. You know, most of these places, again, speaking in a city term, but if you're hiking, you know, somewhere in the middle of, you know, Vietnam, you know, or
Maybe no H&M
Halong
there.
Bay, right? You know, there's not really
But like,
anything there.
how weird would that be?
That would be something.
There'd probably still be a McDonald's or a Starbucks, but
Or Burger King.
yeah. But also know that if you're traveling somewhere and it's in a city and you're starting off easy, then, you know, I think that's a good, you know, start small, start with something that's familiar. And there's a lot of people that travel there, because most likely there will be everything that you need over there.
Yeah.
And you don't need to pack everything and bring it over there. Actually, I find that people pack too much in the beginning. You could really slash a third of that and just leave it at home, and, you know, just pack
He
the
looks at me
essentials.
when he says
Yeah.
that.
I was gonna say, two very chronic overpackers.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a summer suitcase and a winter suitcase, and then a bunch of miscellaneous things, and then that's pretty much it, because I guarantee you're going to buy everything when you're over there.
Yeah.
And I think that goes with traveling and also living abroad. So, you know, don't let that discourage you, thinking that it's going to be an impossible task or that it's too much for you to keep up with, especially with resources now. People have either been there before, or they have YouTube channels or Instagrams or something that you can follow along, but also you can just go be spontaneous and just drop yourself in that area and just challenge yourself to really step out of your comfort zone. But also, I don't know, just really put yourself out there and see if you're able to adapt.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good quality to have, especially if that's something you're looking to do as part of your traveling.
Yeah. You always say, like, you never know how far you can stretch yourself until you put yourself in like a new situation like that. And I think you really realized when you lived in China how much you could handle and figure out and how much you were capable of. And that really helps build a level of confidence that you would never have doing anything else. So
yeah, well, not to romanticize it too much, because it doesn't always pay off in your
but I think
yeah.
it does pay off in the sense of, you know, that you can handle it and maneuver your way through most situations. Not that they're all going to be bright and shiny at the end, but you're like, oh, well, I handled it at least.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it does build your confidence, and it gives you something to refer back to, like the next time you end up in a situation, you're like, well, I got through this, I figured this out, so I can figure this out too.
Yeah.
Just like building up your resilience. Okay. So to wrap it up, before we get into the rapid fires.
This is so much fun, guys. Thank you for doing this.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I'm so happy.
It's a late night in Buffalo in Florida, so, you know,
Yeah,
it's a school night.
It is a school night.
Dog. I've got fireworks out
I'm
my
so
window.
glad you're having fun. That
And a
makes me happy.
Aw. Well, before we get into the rapid fires, which I'm excited about, what qualities do you think a successful expat possesses? And I guess successful meaning like someone who's trying to get the most out of it. And do you ultimately I think we know the answer to this, but just like a say yes to the dress moment, basically. Do you ultimately recommend other people to live abroad?
Main thing that I tell everyone is just be flexible. And, you know, we touched a lot about this, but as soon as people drop into China and we would pick them up at the airport, I'd be like, guys, you gotta be flexible, you know, just please, you know, just relax. Everything's gonna be okay. But also I think not losing that spark, kind of something we touched upon too, is kind of lose track of why you're out there and what you're doing. When it starts becoming more of a job and it starts becoming more of something that you don't want to do anymore, and this could really be transferred to anything, but especially when you're out there and, you know, you're more cooped up about your working situation out there, when you're not thinking about, okay, like I'm living in China, or I'm living in, you know, Russia, or I'm living in Australia. Like, you know, why am I here? It's like, because I'm doing 1, 2, and 3, but I'm worried about 5, 6, and 7, you know, and and I think, you know, that's why people get burned out after a while, is because they're focusing on the wrong things. And I think, you know, once you're out there and, you know, it kind of loses spark and it becomes more of a lifestyle, it's just I think it's beneficial just kind of remember, if you are a visual person, write something on your whiteboard or call mom and be like, Mom, why did I do this? Why am I out here? It's like, well, you were so excited when you did it. I'm like, you're right. If you need to have that conversation with somebody, then do it. Whoever your person is, or just just don't forget, because when you look back on it in the future, I mean, I look back on my time now, and I did kind of feel that way near the end, and like most people do that I knew. And I think it's good to remember that, so you don't kind of dull your time that you're out there.
All right. Well,
I feel like we need like a rapid fire jingle or something.
I kind of like that idea.
We write us like a
rapid fire.
Pew, pew.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
I like that. Okay, so we're going to transition over into our rapid fire questions.
Let's go.
As usual, we created some rapid fire questions that are specific to you, Stephen. And then we have our generic rapid fires that we ask all of our ReDIScover guests.
Let's do it.
So are you ready for your own personal rapid fire questions?
I am ready.
Okay. Number 1, favorite country that you've ever traveled to?
Vietnam.
Oh, that was
why?
quick.
Absolutely. The food, the culture, the time in Hanoi and Hoi An was absolutely fantastic, and probably the most memorable. Greatest group of people that I think I've ever met overseas, and especially since I think I was traveling solo during that time. I was doing a solo backpack trip, and I think a lot of the things that I feel like I was able to accomplish personally, and then but also, again, the people who I met on that trip I still stay in touch with today, and it was just fantastic.
Cool.
That's exciting. That's on my list, so that makes me happy to hear.
Eat the food. Vietnamese food is the best food.
I could literally live on pho, so I need to go immediately. Okay, speaking of food, favorite. Oh my gosh, we didn't even plan this segue. You guys were so good. Favorite foods you've tried on your travels. Now, I know you can't pick one because that's just not even fair. So
it's true.
Whatever
like
comes to the top of your head.
Right. Well, one thing that I always crave are soup dumplings at Din Tai Fung, which I know they have restaurants all over the US, or around the world. So, I could really go anywhere to have those. But I always think about the first time in Taiwan. We were in Taipei and had those soup dumplings, and I was just set for life after those. Total game changer.
Mm-hmm. Is that that's your number 1?
That's my go-to. Absolutely. Also like baozi, which is just your meat buns that you can get on the street. There's nothing more satisfying than waking up at 5:30 in the morning, catch a train to go to Shanghai to go to Disney, and you need something to eat. You just get 3 baozis and just cram those in your stomach, and you're set for like 2 hours, and you're hungry again. But and then we also had a local noodle guy. His name was Tony, and he actually worked on Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. So he was fluent in English.
Oh, cruise food.
And Penny's actually digging a hole right now to China.
And he says, "That's it. I'm going. I want meat buns."
No, but
I want the buns.
But it was right under our apartment complex, and all of us Disney English people were all living in the same apartment. We would eat cold chicken noodles all the time, and they were the best meal ever. So, yep.
Yum.
Those are the go-tos.
Yum. Love food.
Carbs. I'm hearing a lot of carbs, and I'm not mad at it.
All right. What country would you love to live in?
Ooh. Ideally, I mean, of course, it would be Japan.
Really? Me too.
But if there was one, I would love to try living out in Chiang Mai, Thailand for a year. I think that would be a really interesting experience. A lot of great places to go to, and super affordable to get to other places in Thailand. So if you want to spend time in Bangkok, or if you want to go out to Phuket or some of those places, you can really try it out.
Interesting.
Yeah. I like that.
Fun.
Yeah.
So we're sticking with Asia.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. I don't know. Also, my mom also lived in Luxembourg for a really long time.
Oh yeah, you forgot
a blast
to
in the
mention
past. Yeah. So my mom and my stepdad both lived out in Luxembourg for, I think it was 6 years, and we would try to travel out there and visit her for summers and winters, and that was actually really wonderful too. And Luxembourg is, that small country that kind of borders France and Germany. So you kind of live the best of both worlds out there. And and it was super cute. I'd love to do that again. We were just talking about that the other day, actually. We were just like, oh my God, wouldn't it be so cool to just go visit my mom in Luxembourg?
I know. I wish she was still there. I mean, I'm glad she's here, but
But that would be cool too.
Yeah.
So a little bit of Europe. Where would you guys live?
Oh.
Japan.
Oh, well.
Japan?
Also,
oh my God, you want to live in Japan together?
Do you want to go?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why do I feel like this is their way of telling me they're moving to Japan, you guys?
Not yet. It's not open yet.
There's going to be a sign that shows up on the Zoom like, we're moving to Japan.
I think, though, too, there's a lot of European countries I'd like to try. I don't know if it would be for like super long term, but like Italy, France, Greece are my top 3. And then I don't know, maybe like in Australia, New Zealand for a kick. I don't know. I feel like there's so many places I want to live that
Jess needs like 4 lifetimes.
Well, I'll just come back again and do this all over again. But
would you want to live there?
I don't know.
Travel there for a long time?
I mean, maybe with the amount of places I want to quote unquote live, I might just need to do long, like,
I think,
stints.
you need like a month.
A month or like a couple months. Because I don't know, there's just so many places and so many cultures, and I just want to like feel like immersed in them.
Yeah.
It's just, it's an exciting concept.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My top 2 are Italy and Switzerland.
Oh, very nice.
Switzerland.
Italy is like, I will live in Italy at some point. Like it is being manifested slowly over time.
It is done.
And Switzerland, I just I don't know. I just need to be there for a long time. I just think that there's something so untouchable about the way of life there, and sort of the way it's like refused to evolve in some ways, in all the like best ways. And also it's just across the Alps from Italy, so
nice and close.
True.
Pretty easy to get between the two. But yeah, those are my top 2.
Okay, next question. What is your favorite experience you've ever participated in while traveling?
Oh my
Like
gosh.
a cool experience thing that you've done.
Oh man. Okay, well here's one. So me and a group of friends during Chinese New Year, we went island hopping in the Philippines, and one of the islands we went to, I believe, was in Cebu. And in Cebu they had, I think it was in a connection of the hostel we were staying at, but they had canyoneering, which, you're just wearing like a life raft and a helmet, and you're in a group of people and you're just going out in this canyon with waterfalls and like rivers and everything like that. And you'll just be jumping off, cliff jumping and like swimming through water and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying I'm afraid of heights, but also I'm afraid of heights, being also 6'5", so whatever. But I mean, some of the guides would just push people off the cliff if they got too nervous.
No.
And it is the funniest thing. But I'll tell you what, that was probably the wildest thing that I've done, because like zip lining is really cool too, anywhere you go, but you're on a zip line, so you feel pretty secure. Here, you're literally, it's just you and gravity and water and a bunch of rocks. And that was, I think, a really awesome. And that was something that I think everyone in the group really, really loved.
Yeah.
So
That's
that was really
cool.
fun.
Okay, last one before we get into the generics. Preferred mode of transportation while traveling.
Oh.
You can say unicorn.
Oh, well, because my girlfriend is a unicorn.
Thank you.
Wow. You being from Orlando also makes you a unicorn.
Does that make me a unicorn?
Yeah.
So people, we always
How
call.
does that make me a unicorn?
Because
Wait, you've never
unicorns
heard that?
Huh.
So there's this whole thing with like people who are actually Orlando natives are unicorns, because the whole thing with living in Orlando is nobody's actually from Orlando. Like everyone moved here from somewhere.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So you're both unicorns, really.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool.
Unicorn couple. Magic.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, your favorite mode of transportation.
Oh, right. So not a unicorn. I don't know. I really love speed trains. Something that me, Jess, and her brother John have very intense conversations about. And I think that's the one thing that I missed the most about coming back to the States was, of course, DDs and how affordable and how easy it was to get around by car, but also just like speed trains, and just get around that way. Like you never needed a car, didn't even get on a plane. And getting a ticket and security, it was just so easy to bypass it. Trains are never like super packed. There's always a lot of room.
Yeah.
They have, a little bar or something where you can get refreshments, and it's sometimes just as fast. And that's why, like, Europe, they have a great, transit out there, and
Yeah.
even Amtrak to a little bit in the States. I've taken the Amtrak train from New York City to Buffalo, but from New York City to Buffalo, it takes 8 hours, where you can go from Nanjing to Beijing, which Beijing is the northern capital of China and Nanjing is the southern capital, and that takes 4 hours, to cover that much landmass. So
Crazy.
so I do miss that form of transportation a little bit.
All right. Well,
It's time.
it's time. These are our rapid fire questions that we ask all of our ReDiscover guests, and we are very excited to ask them.
I think I've heard a few of these before, so I shouldn't act too surprised when I hear them.
No, well, you've had time to prepare, I guess, for your big debut. Okay, so the first one, what does living authentically mean to you?
I think it's however you act when no one's looking.
Oh.
Yeah.
Feel free to elaborate.
Yeah,
New answer.
I like that.
Yeah, I feel like whoever you are to yourself in a room or wherever you're at by yourself, that's kind of like who you are and who you're comfortable being.
Yeah.
And then, of course, even with the people you trust the most, you're kind of like, I feel like it's a little bit different. So, yeah. Oh, that's kind of the first thing that came to my mind.
That's a really good answer, actually. Because it's like you're peeling away all the layers and any masks that you wear, like to mold yourself to situations. It's just like you at your core.
Right.
That was a great answer.
You could be a very boring person that way, but at least you could be boring at the moment, and it's like, okay, that's what it is.
It's just me, and I'm happy with that.
Or you're one of those people who play like Billy Idol and you're dancing by yourself and in your bedroom, and that's who you are at the moment too, so
If you could, since we're talking about travel all month long, this is apropos, but if you could travel to one place anywhere in the world right now, where would it be and why?
Well, I'm about to go to Lima, Peru for a month, so that's kind of like my first thing. But Jess and I are planning on some really exciting places. And one place that have been both on our lists, I think Iceland was there. And I've always wanted to go to Iceland for any reason. And we just saw a couple of our mutual friends going out there. Right? And
really?
His always goes to Iceland.
and since then, I think it's kind of been in the back of my mind where it's a place that I never thought to go to, but it kind of has just been on every list that has been in the back of my head. And I really kind of like the new place that I never knew about. Everyone wants to kind of go to Paris. They want to go to London. They want to go to Australia. They want to go to Shanghai. They want to go to Bali. But, I never would have thought going to Iceland, for a month or so. So we're finding the right time to go. But I think that's, a really awesome opportunity to really experience something new.
That's really cool. Okay, so Iceland. There you go.
Good answer. Okay, so next question. What is one thing you would be doing every day if your life were free of limitations? Time, money, etc.
Well, I'm going to take it from international and bring it down here. If I can eat barbell chicken wings every day and not gain an ounce and not have a clogged artery, then I would do it. Talk about no limitations.
That was this is
man,
place in Buffalo to get chicken wings. Barbell, write it down.
Right. If I can just have a smorgasbord of beef on weck, pizza logs, chicken wings, and local beer,
so proud of you.
Then I would be set. I don't think you can ever get tired of that food.
It's so good.
I love that you have embraced all of the Buffalo things.
Yes.
Especially our very niche cuisine.
Yeah. Well, I miss China and I'm looking forward to other adventures, but I will miss Buffalo a lot because very much Buffalo is kind of like its own niche thing. And, we can do another episode about Buffalo alone. And I would probably ramble on about all the things that are Buffalo, which will be a lot easier because, traveling to New York is probably closer to home to most people instead of traveling overseas.
Yeah. Also, Yeah, and we talked about this during our episode where we talked about our favorite places to travel domestically, but a lot of those like kind of off the beaten path cities that are smaller are actually so reasonable to travel to. They're way cheaper. And they have a lot of hidden gems and usually a lot of friendly people. So what is one childlike quality that you think would be beneficial if adults utilized it in their daily lives?
First thing is not taking everything so seriously. I try to follow that a lot. And my dad always says something, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's always in the guideline of like, you're always going to grow old, but you never have to grow up. Or something in the guidelines.
Is your dad Walt Disney?
Basically.
He basically is. He's growing his own Disney World in his backyard.
Yeah.
You know, so
he's pretty funny.
Yeah.
He's got like an extensive Art of Disney collection.
Wow.
Respect him for it.
He's going to be the guy that completely renovated his basement into new Fantasyland. Like he's that kind of person that would do that. So he takes it to a whole nother level, and I love him for it. But Disney people, I think, understand that, you know, but I think, you know, if you go to places like Disney, or you like to travel, or you found something that really brings light into your life, then I feel like you just enjoy, you get giddy about it, and you enjoy talking about it. I'm like, well, then why can't life be like that in general? Because it should be something that should be enjoyed. I think for most I should be all the time, but realistically, you know, it's easy to lose sight of that. But I think, you know, for as we get older in our lives, just kind of remembering that we're all kind of blips, and we're just going to be here, and then we're going to leave. So why not make just the most out of it?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a great perspective.
Yeah, I've hit the bottom of my beer bottle. So this
we've hit the bottom of the question.
That was perfect timing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm also a huge dork. So the fact that Jess can put up with me for the last year and a half, and most people in my life for 15, 20 some odd years that I've known most of these people, they know that about me. So,
yes,
you know, it's fun, you know.
It's fun. Yes. But all right. That about wraps up our wonderful interview with Stephen. Thank you for being here. This was so fun. Stephen's been here when Chris and I have gone into my room to record all hours and hours waiting for us to record ReDIScover. So it's been so nice to have you actually on the show today and talking about the thing that you really, really love. So
I do.
It was great. So I hope you guys learned a lot of really interesting things today on the episode. I think this was a great addition to Travel Month because it not only talks about the traveling aspect, but the living aspect too, which I know is appealing to a lot of people, or at least leads to some curiosity. So thanks for shining some light on that.
Absolutely.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. If you're young and you have the means or the ability to find work or a way to go, this is your permission slip.
Okay. And yeah, you're never too old and never too young. Well, maybe, you know,
If
wait till you're 18.
If
right?
you're two, please ask your parents' permission before moving abroad.
Right. Yeah.
So, as this is the last week of August, that means that next month is September, which means we're about to be getting into Jess's favorite time of the year, autumn, and all those apple cider donuts that I'm going to devour. But another special thing about September is that it's ReDIScover's 1-year anniversary. And I'm so excited. I really can't believe it. I don't feel like it's been a year. I feel like last week we were like sitting on your bedroom floor recording the first 3 episodes, but it's been a year. So we're planning some fun things and we want to celebrate as authentically and imaginatively as possible. So stay tuned to hear about that. As always, we let you know about everything on our Instagram platforms. But Stephen, before you go, please tell the human world where they can find you and follow along on your adventures.
Oh, well, yes. Well, I am still known as Stephen Meets World on Instagram.
Which I love.
He has loved that since day one. I remember her being like, Instagram is Boy Meets World theme.
But that is as social media as I get.
Yeah.
You know,
You're pretty chill.
I'm pretty chill. But
you like post regularly. Like,
I like to keep track. It's more, it started off as guidelines for my parents to know that I'm still alive in Asia, but then it just kind of became a hobby.
It's like your digital scrapbook,
It is.
basically.
Yeah, kind of like a journal. You guys do, your journals, but I'm not very good with writing. I don't have the patience for it sometimes. So I'm just like, all right, here's a picture, here's a sentence, and then save it to the digital world.
Here's a pun.
Yeah, here's a pun. Well, I
Okay.
just want to say congratulations to the both of you for 1 year.
Thank you.
And the achievement that it has, that you guys stuck through it over this time.
It's
And
been a joy.
yeah, so it's been great. And you guys were together in Buffalo, but Christy moved to Florida, and Jess, wherever we go, hopefully we're able to be close enough for you guys to connect and do this every week, because this is something special I know you guys want to do.
Yeah.
And it's built some traction. I've been seeing it. I mean, you got Stacy on, and that was just,
We did have Stacy. The best day of our lives.
who's next? That's who I want to know.
Well, Steven Meets World.
Well, it
There
was-
you go. Oh my gosh, I
Hashtag Stevie
follow
Meets
up after
World.
Stacy.
Who knows? Who knows?
Well, thank you so much. And thank you guys so much for listening. If you have anyone in your life who's thinking of living abroad or is interested in the concept, make sure to share this episode with them. If you feel so called, feel free to share this episode or anything ReDIScover related in your Instagram stories. We will repost it and share it and celebrate it, because we are so grateful for all of you. And I think that about wraps it up. So tune in again next time for a new episode. And we are so excited to talk to you once again.
Have fun. Safe travels.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of ReDIScover.
Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. Your reviews are what keep us going, and we'd love to hear from you.
Join us every Tuesday for a new conversation, and let us know what you think we should talk about next.
Follow us on Instagram at positively.kristen and at jessicafay508. And check out Jess's blog at theroadjesstraveled with 1l.com.
Until next time,
Stay frumpy!